Below the mile-high megacity spire lies the cavernous nightmare undercity known as Heart, a hellscape brimming with illegal gods, coiling forests of bones, and magic both undiscovered and lost to time. At the center of it all lies a titular heart, a pulsing rift in reality that contorts the undercity with fleshy plains of brick and stone. You take the role of delvers, the deeply flawed and doomed souls that traverse the hollowed dells between the sparse settlements of the undercity. There are no happy endings here, only misery, madness, and the heart. Welcome to my primer on Heart, the City Beneath, a bizarre and brutal narrative TTRPG. Heart, like many narrative-based games, is rules light, which means it's pretty easy to pick up, and it has no defined rules for combat. Now I know that might scare a few of you, but don't you worry. I can assure you there will be many opportunities for your poor, helpless player character to be maimed and maim in return. So let's just get into the rules. So before we get into rolling, let's take a little stop to talk about the three main attributes you'll be interacting with in Heart. These are your skills, domains, and resistances. Skills are how you interact with the world. They're your ability checks, if you'd like to liken them to D&D. Domains are more your realms of knowledge and your preferred terrain. Resistances can be thought of as your HP pools. Instead of having one singular HP pool, they're split between blood, echoes, mind, fortune, and supplies. This will make a little bit more sense when we talk about the stress mechanic, but let's just move on for now. On to actually rolling dice. So for any roll in Heart, you start off with a d10. Then if you happen to have a relevant skill, you add another d10, another d10 for relevant domain, and another d10 for mastery. Now, not to get into it too much, if you happen to get a relevant skill, again, you're able to gain a mastery in it instead of wasting it. It can also be used as a kind of gimme advantage dice if your players happen to do something that makes their situation more beneficial. As for what these dice actually mean, it borrows from the Powered by the Apocalypse system, in which there is a scaling success and failure system. On a 1, it's a critical failure, 2 to 5, failure, 6 to 7, success at a cost, 8 to 9, success, and 10, critical success. We'll talk more about what stepping up a stress dice means. There's also a disadvantage mechanic, or difficulty mechanic in this case, where instead of, picking the worst, you remove the highest dice from your dice pool depending on the difficulty. These range from standard, where you do nothing, risky, where you remove one of the highest dice, dangerous, where you remove two of the highest, and impossible, where you cannot succeed at all. There's also a mechanic where if a difficulty puts you beneath your dice pool, that is to say, you have 2 dice and you're rolling for dangerous, so you go negative. Essentially what happens is you roll 1d10 and you need to roll a 10 in order to succeed. So, very, very punishing situation you've gotten yourself into. And now we arrive at what I consider to be the main mechanic in this game, and that is stress. This game is all about managing your stress. So let's take a look back at our resistances. I describe them as HP pools, and that's because each resistance can hold up to 12 stress. So whenever you take damage, you're taking stress damage to your blood, echoes, mind, fortune, or supplies. And this leads us to our secondary mechanic, which is Fallout. So whenever you take stress, the DM gets to roll a d12. And if they roll at or below your stress threshold, you take what's known as a Fallout. Now, depending on what I roll, it will either be a minor or major Fallout. On 1 to 6, it's minor. on anything above its major. So this is what happens. Fallouts are a mechanical hindrance on your character, or at times they can also be narrative. But essentially, stress itself does nothing to you. A bit of fallout can impede the way you play, it can change your character motivations on a dime. It's a very strong emergent gameplay device. So just to get into what the differences are between minor and major. Minor, whenever you take a minor fallout, you clear all the stress from that resistance in particular, and then you take your minor fallouts. And minor fallouts are as they sound. They're usually fairly benign and easy to get rid of. Major fallouts, on the other hand, will wipe your entire resistance pools and will inflict a pretty heavy restriction on you. We'll get into some examples later. And what you should know is that there's a third type of fallout, critical fallout. This is when you take two major fallouts, two minor fallouts equal a major fallout, and they're essentially this game's death state. Now, it makes explicit in the rules that death is a choice on the player's part, but of course, sometimes the story, there's not really any other way. You're getting chomped at. It's just natural. You're going to get your head bitten off. Or, if you're being nice, the workarounds are like you're bleeding out, that kind of thing. Last but not least is protection. Protection is a very simple mechanic. For any of your resistances, you can get protection. And protection subtracts the stress damage you're taking at any one time, which is good because it can actually bring it to 0 damage, which is extremely useful. I believe the maximum amount of protection you're allowed to have is up to 5, but even then, protection is very useful. Going to keep your players alive. Your players are going to love getting protection. And those are all the basic mechanics. We'll be getting into classes, delves, landmarks, and some more of the core gameplay loops. But if you just want to hop in with this kind of knowledge, you'll be in a good spot. This game takes very little preparation, which is what I love so much about it. Just get a few friends together, start spitballing, and the stories will unfold onto themselves. Well, if you're going to stick around, let's talk about the classes in Heart. We're not going to go very in depth into what each class are. There's a variety of interesting ones, which you can spend hours reading. All you need to know is essentially what a class has individually. There is a skill that it comes with, a domain it comes with, a resource, which we'll talk about, and some equipment. What you need to know is each class comes with some core abilities, and then a swath of minor, major, and zenith abilities. We're going to talk about how to get these in a bit, but what you need to know is that minor abilities are, some minor alterations. They're usually not too powerful, although there are some very strong minor abilities that I almost feel like should become major, but major abilities usually give you a skill of some sort. They're either a spell or a power-up. And then there's zenith abilities, almost all of which kill you. They're meant to be endgame abilities, but not just endgame abilities, the literal end of your game. Like when your game is coming to a close, you'll pick up a zenith ability, and it's just a very powerful one thing you can do before you go out in a blaze of glory. Next, we get into callings, which are broadly both a backstory template and an XP system. So your calling is why you're in the heart at all. And that informs your minor, major, and zenith beats. These are how you gain abilities in Heart. Minor beats are usually things that can be completed within the session. This can include taking a risk, helping someone out, putting yourself in danger, those kinds of things. Major beats are reserved for either major character moments or major major story moments, like you've completed a fairly lengthy quest, that kind of thing. Zenith beats are specifically when your character story is coming to an end. They've done what they've set out to do, and it's time to retire their character. In return, they get a Zenith ability. Oh, yes, I should mention. So these beats translate directly into minor, major, and Zenith abilities for your character. This may seem like a bit too much. Some people may say, wow, you'd probably get a lot of minor beats in between sessions. And I say, yes, you'd likely be getting between 2 to 3, hopefully not one, minor beats per session, and maybe even a major beat if you happen to complete something. And I'll tell you, this game is particularly brutal in combat. No matter how much you have, it's you're getting a lot and you're facing a lot. So I think it balances out. But yeah, that's the XP mechanics. Um, I think I'll just move on to a broad character generation step by step. You choose your ancestry. There are 4 races: high elves, dark elves, humans, and gnolls. You could potentially add in your own, it doesn't necessarily matter. Then you choose your calling, then you choose your class and their abilities, and then you select 1 major and 3 minor abilities to start out. You choose your equipment, you choose 2 beats from your calling, and then you can add a bit more to your backstory. And that's generally how you create a character. I'm not going to go into the ancestry details here. There's quite a bit of lore behind it. You're welcome to look into that on your own. Here's my other cutoff point. This is essentially things that are going to make more sense when you play, but I'll have them here just in case you really want to know. I won't go too deep into it just because your game master might tweak this a bit. This is really where the game opens itself up to a few different interpretations. So let's just get into it. You can, again, much easier to just learn as you go at this point. But if you really want to know, we'll start with resources. Resources are a very integral part of Heart. They're essentially what you're going to be trying to get almost all of the time. Resources aren't necessarily, just like flat gold. They're usually, very just valuable items. The Heart in general revolves around a barter system. Of course, resources are useful for way more things. They can be used to heal. They can be used to activate certain abilities, like the cleavers. You can eat an item and gain its domain, that kind of thing. So you're always going to be looking for resources, and your game master in general will be willing to give you a lot of the smaller ones. Each resource comes with its own domain and potentially even a resource tag. There's a list of resource tags. You can read through them. The last thing to mention about resources before I cut off is each one has a dice associated with it. This is how valuable it is. So it can be used as a sell value. It can also be used as a modifier when dealing stress with that item. We'll get into that. But that's about as much as I want to talk about resources right now. Equipment is broken down into 4 kinds. There's delve equipment, kill equipment, mend equipment, and of course miscellaneous, which are just your normal items. You use delve equipment on delves, which we'll touch on. They're essentially your treks to different locations. That's what a delve is. Kill weapons, of course, involve weapons, attacks, that kind of thing. They can also spells also use the same kill tag. Men can mend a variety of different things. They're usually blood, but of course they can be used for mind, echoes, maybe fortune, depending on what you have. Now let's get on to how you actually deal stress. What are some of the intricacies there? They 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 work essentially how you take stress. Someone succeeds a roll against you and they get to deal stress. The same thing happens for you. For kill skills, it's very straightforward. Most enemies have a resistance pool as opposed to your 5 different resistances. They just have a general 1 resistance. So if they have 15, you have to deal 15 points of stress on them. With a kill equipment, that would be, you've got your 1d6 sword. You succeed, you hit them with a 1d6, and so on. This can also apply to delves, which we're about to get into, or if your game master wants to have a kind of narrative combat, like you're trying to convince a holy man or something, you could potentially use one of your resources in that case, saying you have a 1d8 religion resource. You might be able to use that to inflict stress or up your stress. It gets very variable on how you can inflict stress or when you have time to actually use your resources in that way. Next, we'll talk about delves and monsters, since they're somewhat related. We'll go ahead and start with delves. Delves are tracks between 2 locations, and they act as if they were monsters. So a delve actually has a resistance associated with it. Although instead of inflicting kills or whatnot, you would inflict delve damage on it. Although passing delve checks is not the only thing you can do in order to actually deal damage to the delve. There'll be a wide variety of situations that the game master's going to throw at you as you go along the delve. They'll present little situations and you can solve them, and maybe even put little side content within a delve. For example, let's say you see some dogs. Instead of fighting them or whatnot, you can try to evade them, and so you succeed and you deal damage to the delve based on your delve equipment. Standard, it's just 1d4. So you really want to make sure you have at least some sort of delve equipment when you go into these things. Monsters, we've touched on them on dealing damage. They've got resistances, they've got protection, they've got some special abilities. But just as you interact with anything else, it's just, kill skill on them or maybe some improvised situation, and you try to whittle them down to 0 resistance, and that's how you beat them. Okay, I've been going a bit fast on these topics, mostly because I don't believe they'll really make sense until you actually play. And this is the final thing: locations. There's not too much to say about them since they can be so broad, of course, but each location has 2 things which are important. They're called haunts. We've talked a lot about gaining stress. Haunts are how you get rid of it. Usually in locations that aren't openly hostile to you, there'll be a few haunts, and you can trade in items in order to get reduce your stress in the associated resistance. And the game master will tell you, well, okay, they have a doctor's office. They can deal blood. They can heal blood and mind stress. And there might be other places where you can heal fortune, echoes. You can almost always heal supplies because that's just trading items. And as far as like healing stress outside of locations, it seems to be discouraged overall. Especially, you're not really supposed to heal during delves, it seems like, or combat, but it can be done. From what I understand, if you do, it's at a penalty unless your class has some specific things that allow that. I might be wrong on that point, but you're welcome to play around with those rules. Next, we're just going to do some examples in Roll20. Just going to spitball a situation. We're going to roll some dice. It'll give you a better idea of how things are done, real time within the game. Okay, here's our quick example play. I did one before, but it was a little too long, so let's try to keep this snappy. I have a Delver of no particular class, doing a D4 delve, or resistance 4 delve, and at the end he'll have a little fight with a bandit, and we'll call it there. So delves, like monsters, have resistance. You attack them with the delve item that you have. Our delver has 1d6 short sword, 1d6 compass. Compass is a delve item, so we'll start off by saying he sees a pack of wild dogs in the middle of the road. In order to get past them, he's going to try to evade them. So this delve happens to be of the Haven domain. He does not have that domain, but he does have the evade skill, so he will be rolling 2d10s. Both 7s, so that is a success at a cost. So our brave Delver manages to get away, but just, as the dogs are running past him, one of them seems to nick his bag, and a few supplies fall off. So this is going to be a 1d4 to his supplies stress or resistance. 2. Every time you take stress, I roll a d12 to see if you fall out. Nope, he's safe. You do not roll under or at. Let's see how much damage our Delver did to this. So he only did 2 damage to the delve, so he's halfway there. At this point, I'll just do a general delve check. Let's say he doesn't happen to have the delve skill. He's rolling a straight d10. Succeeds again at a cost. The brambles, it's easy to get lost. He gets a little paranoid at some point. He's going to take a d4 to mind stress. Or actually, just to keep it consistent, one of the brambles scrapes his bag and some supplies fall off. 3. Okay, so he's now 5 stress in the supplies category. Let me have my book open so I can, just in case we fall out, roll that d12. No, sir, he is safe. He's safe, but I will go ahead and keep the fallouts open just in case something does happen, which I hope it does, because I do need to show that off in one way or another. So another d6. You see, so this is the kind of stuff that can happen. Normally you'd have multiple people rolling for things, or you might have better delve weapons, but he would have to make another one. He's almost there, but for now we'll just say he cleared it. He goes on to this desolate town. That's the domain name. It's desolate. He sees a bandit on the road, gunned by his pistol. Our poor Delver is a melee character, so although he knows he has to get in range, there's nowhere to hide, so he's just going to have to charge forth, which means the enemy's going to have a chance to hit. Most enemies do not have any skills related to them, so they're usually only rolling 2d10 because they're usually of the domain they're in. So we'll roll 2 9s, success. We'll go ahead and say this is a 1d6 pistol. 2 blood damage. Not a lot. Guy's looking healthy. So let's roll our... Ooh, close. Our poor Delver almost took some damage. But little did they know. Our Delver, he's both got the kill skill and the desolate domain, so he will be rolling 3d10s. And he succeeded at a cost. So we'll go ahead and roll a d4. I'm rolling a d4 because of the tier of the heart. Your dungeon master will tell you as you go along. But yeah, so straight d4. let's say this is to his mental. You know, he wasn't in proper form. He didn't feel like his strike landed as true as it could have. 1d4 mental. Let's go. Nope. Still no fallouts. Very, very good show. So yeah, he's gonna do. Yes, we should establish the resistance of the bandit. I want to say he's got 5 resistance, but 1 protection. So this is gonna get downgraded to 3 stress on the bandit. He gets a nasty slash at his side. Enemies don't take fallouts, by the way. Would be kind of fun, but also slow the game down a little too much. So our bandit, he's in close range at this point. You know, he's gotten charged on. So he's either going to have to make an evade roll or hit him with his smaller melee weapon. And let's say he's got a knife at his boot, and that's what he's going to do in order to actually attack this round. So 2d10. Ooh, good. And he crits. So you on a crit, you step up the damage dice of whatever you were using. So if it was like a delve item, you know, you'd upgrade that. Same thing as mend and kill in this case. The dagger is probably just going to be a 1d4, so it's going to get stepped up to a 1d6. So okay. Man, our Delver's doing pretty good so far. Sorry, let me just make sure I'm tracking this right. So where are we at? Succeed. That's his success. It's bandit. So he's got 3. So he's got 3 blood stress at the moment. Not gonna take a fallout. We'll just say he takes a fallout. Okay, guys, we need to show off all these mechanics. So he takes a blood fallout, and now the blood fallout is going to be that he's bleeding. At every end of a situation, he'll take a d4 blood stress. Situations can be combat rounds or combat encounters. I'm a little iffy on which one's which, but for dramatic, I think we'll just do it per round. He won't take anything this round, but maybe after his turn. So he got hit pretty nastily, but it didn't do that much damage other than the bleeding that we self-imposed on him, of course. Delver, let's see if we can finish him off. Yes, he most certainly can. At least I mean, I suppose there's a chance he won't. It will be disappointing. That, yeah, oh yeah, head clean off. Okay, so that's my example. I hope it was helpful. You'll learn more in play, but if this was helpful, you know, I'm glad you watched. I'll see ya.